Chapter 7, Protein Screencast 4. This screencast will be focusing on two things. One will be the RDA. So this is one that I do actually want you to memorize, and there will be some questions on the exam that are calculations based on the RDA. And we'll see that in just a second. And also kind of looking at how our body actually processes the proteins that we consume. So the concept of digestion and absorption will also be covered here. Now, what we need to remember here, and once again, this is the value that needs to be memorized, the adult RDA is 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. And once again, we're talking about healthy body weight, and also remember that 2.2 pounds equal 1 kilogram. The other thing that you want to remember, as usual, is going to be the AMDR for a particular energy-yielding nutrient. And for protein, the AMDR is 10 to 35% of calories consumed. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that the RDA does not address additional protein amounts needed during recovery from some illness or injury and highly trained athletes. But having said that, probably one of the most abused statements is, I am going to the gym more, so I need to significantly increase the amount of protein that I'm consuming. But when we actually look at the amount of protein that the typical American is consuming, we're getting plenty of protein. Probably everyone in the country is on a weight training program if we really break that down. But what you will see as far as the amount of protein that's recommended, anywhere from 0.8, which is the adult RDA, up to 2 grams per kilogram. Now, here we're kind of looking at the process of protein digestion and absorption. And one thing to keep in mind here is this is actually beginning in the stomach. Protein will be partially digested by the enzyme pepsin and also the hydrochloric acid that we find within the stomach. Now, the pancreas, this will actually produce a number of enzymes that are going to be released into the small intestine, and their primary role is to digest proteins. Within the small intestine, this is where the final digestion of proteins to amino acids will take place. Now, in the liver, we'll be looking at amino acids are absorbed via the portal vein and transported to the liver. From there, they will enter the general bloodstream. Now, keep in mind, the liver is also one of the organs in the body where our plasma proteins are produced primarily. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, when we look at what's happening to protein in the large intestine, very little dietary protein is actually present in the waste that we excrete as feces. Now, one thing that will have an impact on protein is the cooking process that's used. Kind of imagine what cooking is going to do. It tends to be at a higher heat. You're going to denature proteins. Also remember, protein is predominant in connective tissue, and this will make proteins easier to chew, digest, and to be absorbed eventually. And once again, in the body, we are actually seeing the beginning of protein digestion begin within the stomach. And remember, we have pepsin, which is going to initially break down these long polypeptide chains into smaller ones. And hydrochloric acid is actually denaturing the protein. Then this is going to be controlled by the release of gastrin when we look at pepsin. Now, chyme will enter the small intestine, and this will actually trigger the release of intestinal hormones, primarily secretin and cholecystokinin. There are also going to be hormones that stimulate the pancreas to release proteases. Examples would be trypsin, chymotrypsin, and carboxypeptidase. And they will actually complete the digestion of polypeptides within the small intestine. Now, one thing to remember here is these enzymes that digest protein that are produced within the pancreas are going to be inactive, and they will actually become more active and once they're in the small intestine. And so what we're actually going to see is smaller peptides, so short peptides and amino acids, they're going to be actively absorbed. In absorptive cells, short peptides further digested by peptidases will travel to the liver via the portal vein. Here we can actually get an idea of protein digestion and absorption. So notice we start off with a polypeptide within the stomach. These polypeptides are going to be broken down into tripeptides and dipeptides. And keep in mind, we are now in the lumen of the small intestine. And then we amino acids. Amino acids will basically be amino acids that move into the blood. And what we can see here is tripeptides actually being broken further into amino acids, dipeptides, but eventually it all boils down to amino acids that are going to make their way into circulation in our bloodstream. Now, once in the liver, amino acids are used for a number of things. One is going to be protein synthesis to meet energy needs. But keep in mind, when we talk about the job of protein, it really isn't to provide energy, and we really don't want to rely on protein for energy. That's an important thing to keep in mind when we're addressing this. And the other thing that might happen is the conversion to carbohydrate or fat for release into the bloodstream. So there are some amino acids that we will be referring to as different types of what they produce, and some can actually be known as glucogenic, meaning that their carbon skeleton can be used to produce glucose. Now, during early infancy, the GI tract is permeable to small proteins. And the thing that we have to keep in mind here, proteins from some foods may actually predispose infants to food allergies. So it really is advised to wait until an infant is 4 to 6 months old or older to start introducing foods that we commonly associate with allergies.